But for me, he has to get in that top 5. I'm not sure what your top 5 would look like, Paulie.
Randy Turpin. I got it. Randy Turpin. That was the guy. Randolph Turpin. She kept pushing him back, and then he'd say, step back, push back. Yo, I'm trying to finish the guy here.
Yes, people, I am Savage Dan.
I'm Paulie Malignaggi.
You are watching Mouthpiece, the official boxer podcast. Welcome back to Mouthpiece. I'm Savage Dan.
I'm Paulie, the Magic Man Malignaggi.
As always, remember, like, comment, subscribe. You're going to hear me say it over and over again. But let's get straight into it this week because it is a special one. Josh Taylor beats Ramirez to become the undisputed unified fighter at 140. And you know what? I wasn't aware that he is only the 5th fighter in history to be the champion of all four belts.
Yeah. ESPN actually had that stat. I think they had 6 guys, but I'm not. But he's actually the second one at 140 pounds. Terrence Crawford did it as well, so very recently. So he's the second super lightweight to accomplish this feat. It was going to be accomplished either way, even if Ramirez won the fight on Saturday. So the winner of that fight became the second fighter to unify the 140-pound division in all four in the 4-belt era. I felt the fight didn't disappoint. I felt like they both fought a really good fight, and it was a really high-skilled, good pace, high-skilled, and entertaining fight.
Why do you think there's only been 5 or 6 undisputed champions? Is there so much politics in boxing that champions don't get to fight champions?
Yeah, at the end of the day, there's promotional rivalries, the network rivalries that prevent fights from happening and unifying, right? Then there are situations where champions have to fight mandatories, and the mandatories are sometimes the governing body the sanctioning body will make an exception with the mandatory, and sometimes they'll say no, you have to fight the mandatory or you get stripped. So that prevents it. And sometimes there's just a good old ducking. That sometimes they just don't want to fight. They just avoid the unification. And the fighters themselves avoid it. So it's a little bit of politics and a little bit of maneuvering as well. Sometimes it's circumstantial either way. But I was really pleased with the fight. Josh Taylor is terribly underappreciated. I cannot believe the UK didn't have a TV for this fight. I mean, how do you do that? Yeah. I mean, shame on the UK TV networks for doing that to Josh Taylor. That is unbelievable. I mean, when was the last time the UK had a 4-belt world champion or a chance for the UK to have a fighter going into a fight to come out with all 4 world titles and become the undisputed champion?
Hopefully we'll have that in the heavyweight division sometime.
Yeah,
but I mean,
the UK
right.
But the UK will televise that. The UK will televise the heavyweight fight. How do you do that to Josh Taylor? That's crazy.
Tell you why.
That's absolutely ludicrous.
I've said it for a while. I remember saying it around 6 months ago. I thought Josh Taylor, for me, him alongside it was Callum Smith at the time, and just before he got beat by Canelo, were the 2 best British fighters right now, of my opinion. I was at the Prograis fight, and it was beautiful. It was 2 fighters, really good thinking fighters, that still want to whip in mean shots and have a tear up, but it's so skilled and it's all about time, and they stayed mid-range for the whole fight.
I actually going into the Prograis fight felt Prograis was going to beat him, so he actually even surprised me. And Taylor really, I feel like, is an improving fighter. He's a fighter who's getting better and better, and for me, he's the best Scottish fighter they've ever had. For me personally.
Best British?
He's better than Ken Buchanan. Best British, now you're opening the table to a lot, but it's, then you can, if you start going with best British, you can start going all the way to who's the guy that beat Ray Robinson? I forget his name. They got I'm terrible. I can't believe I'm forgetting this guy's name. He beat Ray Robinson.
I know who you're talking about, but I don't know the name, and I'm gonna say around 4 names.
You guys are gonna kill me at home. You get your fans, and you know what? I deserve it for it's on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, I feel like Josh Taylor is right now the best fighter in British boxing, and the fact that they didn't even give him a TV slot for his unification is absolutely appalling to me, And he was going in the fight as the favorite, you know. I mean, to me, it was a 50-50 fight, but he's that. So it's not like the odds makers don't know this guy's good. I mean, he went into this fight as the odds-on favorite to win the fight, and he won it. But I can't. I'm terribly.
I suppose it goes back to what we've been covering for the last few weeks, Paulie. When we're talking about, it's almost profile is more important than skill set and more important than achievements at the moment in boxing. I mean, I'm not sure what more you have to do to be in a British all-time best fighter list. You've just won every belt there is to win.
But Dan, to build your profile, I mean, you need the TV networks to build it. You need their help to build it for you too. You know, this guy won the Super 6 or whatever it's called, the World Series of Boxing, whatever the tournaments they call these tournaments now. I mean, that was a very tough tournament. He beat Baranchik, he beat Prograis, and now he's beating Ramirez. I mean, Ramirez was not even in that tournament. So to me, honestly, for me, and Ramirez is no slouch, but for me, Josh Taylor took the tougher road to get to this point, and then also beat Ramirez. Because Ramirez not being in that tournament had it a little bit easier. Not to say he had it too easy, because the Maurice Hooker win is a good win. He's fought Amir Imam. Total respect to Jose Ramirez, by the way. I felt real bad for him in the post fight interview in the dressing room that I saw after on the post-fight coverage. I could see he was really dejected, but this kid is a class act, lives an exemplary lifestyle, and is a phenomenal fighter himself. And I'll tell you what, I actually like when I see guys kind of dejected, even breaking down and crying after losses, because to me, that means that they are super competitors. Like when you take that much disappointment to heart after losing a fight, you are an extreme competitor. And I feel like we all go through that at a certain point, and then it kind of leaves us. It kind of the enthusiasm and passion for what we do kind of leaves us, and it becomes just strictly about business. But at first, you have that insane competitiveness. And when I saw Ramirez kind of dejected after the fight, he looked like he was going to break down in the dressing room when the ESPN announcers were talking to him. I felt like, wow, even though this guy has already won 2 world title belts and has achieved this much, he still got that fueling, burning desire that he so badly wanted to win that he's absolutely gutted that he's lost this fight. And he's got nothing to be ashamed of for me. I think Jose Ramirez will be back. I look forward to seeing him back, and I think he's going to become a world champion again, and deservedly so. He's a phenomenal fighter. But having said that, Josh Taylor was extremely impressive. I mean, I love the way he changes range, changes levels, consistently does it, and he's able to punch off of all that as well. Real hard to hit, real smooth operator in there, fast hands. I felt Kenny Bayless was kind of sleeping in the fight. And at one time I thought Kenny Bayless was the best referee in boxing, but in recent years I felt like he's been a little bit off. Maybe it's the age. Maybe sometimes maybe referees get worn out too. And they they work too many fights. Ever since he worked that Mayweather Maidana rematch, where he absolutely was breaking them every single second, he wouldn't give Maidana a chance to work. I felt like, you know what? It was starting to become the first or second times where I remember not really being enthused with the way he refed it, and even
was it a tough fight to ref? Was it a tough? Because I noticed
it wasn't a crazy tough fight to ref. Here's 2 things that I didn't like. Okay, I'm going to tell you the 2 things personally that I didn't like. Everybody's talking about the push off Josh Taylor had with the knockdown, right? I don't have a problem with Josh Taylor bumping off, because that's part of inside boxing. Okay, but what I do have a problem with is Bayless half-heartedly looking to break them there.
Yes,
like he's about to step in, and then he doesn't step in.
I'm sure
and you could see his hand.
Did he even tap someone?
Yeah, his hands are there, but you gotta be a boss in there if you're a ref, and especially in this kind of fight. So they're working in there. I mean, Ramirez should have been more alert inside. He should have, and I don't think it was illegal what Taylor did, because you're allowed to. All those little bump offs happen all the time in boxing, but Ramirez, Bayless could have confused Ramirez slightly by touching him and kind of making like he was about to break them and then not doing it, So you either do it or you don't. You can't half-heartedly do something like that. Secondly, I had a problem with after both knockdowns, he's pushing back Taylor constantly. He's pushing back Taylor more than he's pushing Ramirez back on the brakes. He's preventing Taylor from getting to him. Even after the initial knockdown when Taylor's coming in for the finish, both times he's pushing Taylor all the way back, and then Taylor goes back, and he continues to push him back. It reminded me of Alfred Azaro when he did that to Gerald McClellan, when McClellan was trying to knock out Nigel Benn in round 1. That Azaro just wouldn't let McClellan go in for the finish. He kept pushing him back, and then he'd say, step back, push back. Yo, I'm trying to finish the guy here. You know what I'm saying? Like the fight, the fight's almost over, and he kept pushing and pushing and pushing him back, and eventually Ben was able to get out of the first round, and we saw the disaster that created later in the fight. But it reminded me of the way he was pushing back Taylor when Taylor was trying to go for the finish after the 2 knockdowns. It reminded me a lot of Alfred Azaro in that way, too. He was pushing Taylor back, and then Taylor would step back and then was looking to come back in for the finish, and he pushed him back again. Bro, what are we doing over here? The count is over. I don't have to stay in the neutral corner. The count is over already. I'm here because the count is over. If I'm still counting, okay. You're still counting, I have to be in the neutral corner. The count is over. You're about to put us back in. Why you keep pushing this back? This is not an amateur fight. This is a pro fight. And Kenny knows that because Kenny has worked a lot of pro fights, and he's been a great referee in the past.
Do you think that's him overcompensating for the fact that he knows deep down that he had, even if it's a small part to play, he had a tiny part to play in that second knockdown?
Possibly, but he did it in the first knockdown too. So I might go with that, but he did it on both knockdowns. He did it on the counter left hand. By the way, that was a sweet counter left hand by Taylor on that first knockdown. Yeah, he was backed into the corner. So Ramirez rightfully is trying to get more aggressive and throw a power right hand, but nice slick. That's what I mean about Taylor. He's able to defend with his changing range with his legs. He's always so well balanced, And then he also has this up and down of change of level that he does.
Yes.
Very well. Yeah. All the while, and he also can change distance as he changes his level too. He can do both of those at the same time at times. And then, of course, he's got a catch and shoot, really good catch and shoot, where a lot of times he'll block and he'll fire hooks, he'll fire uppercuts off the catch. So I remember Teddy Atlas years ago talking about your modes of defense, right? You have your legs, you have blocking, and you have slipping and sliding or countering. So, and honestly, legs and blocking can't really be used at the same time. It kind of can, but you can't really punch off of it if you're moving. But when you set yourself, when you block and punch, catch and shoot, you're able to translate that defense into offense. Because what you want to be able to do always, any kind of way you're defending, you want to always give yourself an option to be able to punch off the defensive maneuver. Mm-hmm. And I feel like Taylor always creates that option, whether he uses it or not. He always creates that option for himself because he's so well balanced and he's so well positioned, both with his hands and his legs. Terrific fundamentals there by Josh Taylor. And then of course you bring the natural gifts to it, which is the natural speed. He's got his intelligence with his shot selection. Really, really good, because I felt like Ramirez early on was really pressing it, and I thought that he was going to start giving Taylor a lot of problems. And then it wasn't until the knockdowns where Ramirez kind of lost that steam, and afterwards I felt Taylor controlled the fight a little bit better. But a really good fight. Big props to both of these guys. Really disappointed this fight wasn't talked about more, and it wasn't shown in the UK. But terrific props to these guys. They're both phenomenal fighters, and guys that I look forward to watching in the future. I look forward to Jose Ramirez returning in the future. I'd like to see something like guys that Taylor beat fight each other. For example, I'd love to see Ramirez and Prograis. I think that would be a great fight. I think it will be an amazing fight. I think Teofimo Lopez is on his way to 140 pounds soon. He's going to join this mix. I think it's amazing. Josh Taylor and Crawford. I don't think that's a bad fight. I think both of those guys are the two guys that unified the 4-belt era, the world championships in the 4-belt era at 140 pounds. They've both done it very, very recently. Taylor obviously just did it over the weekend. Yeah. And honestly, I feel like while I would favor slightly Crawford at this moment in this fight, I already underestimated Taylor with the Prograis fight, and he beat Prograis. Yeah. So I wouldn't be shocked no matter who wins the fight. But if I had to pick, I'd say, okay, I'd favor Crawford. I feel like he has a little bit more versatility. Yeah. He's a little bit more athleticism to him, and he knows how to use it to his advantage. But nonetheless, I do say that Taylor's road to unifying 140 pounds was a more difficult one than Terence Crawford's road to unifying 140 pounds. And for that reason, I think it still makes for another subject matter to be discussed in the topic. But they're both signed with Top Rank. This is a fight that probably gets made, and I look forward to it.
So would you say Josh Taylor's next move is to go to 147? If he, not necessarily that he's chasing the Crawford fight, but would you stay at 140 and wait for the likes of Teofimo and Haney to come up for you, or would you go and chase 147?
Personally, and I'm not saying this is the right move, but I think there's probably more money in the Crawford fight. And at 30 years old, you're probably looking at you're also considering that as well, because you're not a spring chicken anymore, but you're still kind of primed, you know. So I feel like the Taylor-Crawford fight can always be made, Crawford-Taylor fight can always be made, and then you can always go back down in case and fight those guys, you know, because the weight's only one weight class difference. Having said that, they're also both with Top Rank, and Top Rank is having trouble finding Crawford, you know, legitimate, deserving opponents, you know. They tried to build up Kavaliuskis to a certain degree, only for then Crawford to make him look like he didn't belong in the ring with him, you know. Yeah. They're trying to put guys in positions to where they can make the Crawford fight, because they're not able to, build up and make that Spence fight, because there's so much politics involved on both sides that they need to kind of figure out a way to get Crawford in fights that people will be interested in, because Crawford might be the best fighter in boxing. You know, he's definitely in the conversation for the best pound for pound fighter in the world. So it's always a challenge to kind of find this opposition for him that people will feel is deserving. I mean, I was looking at the Top Rank Instagram page yesterday, and I saw that, they posted about Taylor wanting to fight Crawford. And I don't feel like there should be any negativity towards that. Nothing wrong with wanting to fight that fight. There's nothing wrong with him wanting it specifically, because I feel like he deserves to be able to call out Crawford. He's done more than enough to be able to be deserving of that fight. I saw somebody like Damian Lillard, who's I don't know if the UK they know him, but he's a superstar NBA player. He basically left a comment like this is like Crawford walks through this guy easily. Like, first of all, why you throwing salt on the fight when the fight is a great fight to make, number one. Number two, do you even see Josh Taylor fight? Have you even seen Josh Taylor fight? That's the disappointment about all this. Not enough people are talking about Josh Taylor. Yeah. Josh Taylor belongs on the pound-for-pound list. Unequivocally belongs on the pound-for-pound list, especially at this point. Yeah. And this is a great fight to make. I would expect Top Rank, especially that they have the contracts on both of them, I would expect Top Rank to make this fight, and I would be highly surprised if they don't make this fight.
Those same people who don't want to watch that fight and they don't know enough about boxing, Paulie. They probably think Mike Tyson was a middleweight. They literally don't know enough. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
But then what I'm saying is, if you don't like the Taylor fight, what do you like for Crawford? Stop saying Spence, because Spence is not happening for various reasons. Not to mention Spence has a fight scheduled.
They want Canelo. They just want names they recognize. That's it. They just want anything.
Yeah.
Fights
they don't even
happen.
Weight class notwithstanding, right? It's ridiculous. But because in reality, you just made Spence and Pacquiao. So now Spence is busy with this fight. You know what I'm saying? And Pacquiao always seems to throw it's like a buzzsaw in there who kind of always changes the trajectory of the sport with a crazy result. Like, he beat Keith Thurman a couple of years ago, and that changed the look of the welterweight division. So you've got Pacquiao in there now. You never know what this guy's going to accomplish or do. Either way, if whether Spence wins or loses the fight, Spence is busy with that fight. So you've got to start, looking at what's next for Terrence Crawford. I mean, listen, Kell Brook was a nice name, but Kell Brook was past his prime. Amir Khan was a nice name, but Amir Khan was past his prime. Terrence Crawford may beat those guys in their primes. Not necessarily saying for sure, because Brook and Khan in their primes were great fighters. But what I'm saying is, you've got to start getting superstar fighters or top-level fighters for Terrence in their prime, so that he can also get a chance to be appreciated if he can beat them. You know what I'm saying? And vice versa. Josh Taylor also deserves to start getting some credit as well, because he's just been severely unappreciated right now. I mean, I still, again, I will say it again. I shame on the UK for not getting a TV contract on this fight. This guy is one of your own fighters, and for me right now is probably the best fighter from the UK in boxing. And that says a lot, because the UK has a lot of very good fighters.
Well, one thing's for sure, we definitely have a prime Josh Taylor. We can't work out exactly where he ranks amongst all-time British fighters. But for me, he has to get in that top 5. I'm not sure what your top 5 would look like, Paulie.
Randy Turpin. I got it. Randy Turpin. That was the guy. Randolph Turpin. The guy that beat Ray Robinson.
He's in your top 5?
Turpin probably, might be number one because just on the Ray Robinson win, Turpin is like those guys plus those guys from that era, they're legendary to people in people's eyes. They
were fighting each other every week, every 2 weeks. It was crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so Turpin is always in the conversation for tops. Guys like Lennox Lewis are in the conversation for tops. It's then after that you can kind of mix and match and whatever. There's a lot of you start going into your McClellan, not your McClellan, your Benz, your Eubanks, your Michael Watsons. Really great rivalry in the '90s. Those guys deserve to be in the conversation.
Well, I'm guessing that'd have to be a world champion and a significant enough one.
Yeah, Josh Taylor is in the conversation.
Yeah, well, Josh Taylor goes straight on that list. Where does Joshua fit in there? I suppose he's done quite a lot.
Joshua and Fury, in terms of top 5 all-time British fighters, are putting themselves up in a position where only one of them can be there. Yeah, because you can. Because if you're not even the best British fighter of your era, it's going to be hard to pick you as one of the top 5 of the all-time era of British fighters, right? So they're going to put themselves in a position to where only one of them can be in that list anyway. But that doesn't mean that the guy who doesn't wind up on that list is cannon fodder, is bird fodder. That doesn't mean anything. Because British boxing has obviously produced a ton of super talents. And so just because you're not in the top 5 all time of the all-time British super talents doesn't mean anything. I think of guys I remember as a kid, Lloyd Hunnigan, Prince Nassim Hamed, who was absolutely one of my all-time favorites. Prince Nassim Hamed, but also Lloyd Hunnigan, exactly. The conversation, you can mix and match names, and you can kind of sit down and chat about it with the fellas.
Getting a top 5 is difficult. The names it's difficult. It's difficult. Let us know what you think your top 5 British fighters of all time is. I guarantee we don't get the same list more than once. It's just too difficult to call. But
especially in the same order for sure.
Yeah. By my rankings, Josh Taylor has just done enough to go in there just based off what he's done in the last couple of years, and it may have gone under the radar a little bit, but he has unified a division, and not many people have done that ever before.
He took the O's of the 3 very good fighters. Baranchik, Prograis, Ramirez were all undefeated when he fought them. Yeah. And all very, very difficult guys to beat, all on a championship level. That is, like I said, I feel like he unified the 140-pound division in a more impressive way than Crawford did, even if I would slightly favor Crawford and his versatility in a head-to-head fight.
Sam Eggington also beat Eric Molina for the WBC Silver. What do you see on the horizon for Sam Eggington? I know he's a previous opponent of yours.
Sam. I ended my boxing career. I ended my boxing career with Sam. Once I lost to Sam, I said, I'm just sick of trying to rebuild myself back to these positions. And now, if I'm losing on to guys who are not known internationally, I have to kind of reconsider myself. But Sam has really, really done a great job. He is the blue collar, bring your lunch pail to work kind of guy, and he refuses to say die. He refuses to go away. And this is the impressive thing about Sam. The impressive thing about Sam is he's constantly counted out. People always kind of count him out, and he's always back in the mix somehow. He's up and down. I feel like he's got to be more consistent, because what I'm noticing about Sam is he's got more lives than a cat. But in reality, it's because he's been at this for so long. He's a veteran, even at a young age. Yeah. Now, here's the thing about him, though. He tends to pull off fights that he's not supposed to win, or he tends to pull off impressive wins where people kind of have doubts about him winning. But then he'll go and lose a fight where people will expect him to win, and kind of he'll be back to square one. So the important thing for Sam right now is, after this win, which is an impressive win, it's Molina is a guy who a lot of guys have stayed away from in Sam's position, but Sam took him head on and beat him. The thing that Sam has to now be careful with is, once again, not disappointing when he starts to get people to back believing in him. It's like he fights better when people don't believe in him. I remember Eddie Hearn not having much doubt that I would beat Sam at the time. But man, when you're in there and you're getting older and you got this guy who doesn't stop, and he's a big welter. He was a big welter. I was like, eventually this guy was able to wear me out. But I remember speaking to John Pegg, his trainer, and I remember he was able to win the European Championship afterwards. We kept in touch, and we're on friendly terms. And then Sam got knocked out randomly by, I think, the African kid. I forget his name. It was some kid from Africa. He stopped him, but he stopped him standing up. And I remember I thought about something. I told John, I said, he should have learned in round 6 of the end of my fight when I heard him at the end of round 6, and I knew I had low time left when I heard him. I hit him with a sharp 1-2, and I knew I had no time left because I had heard this. When you hear that. So I had already heard that. So it was less than 10 seconds left. So I figured, let me just let my hands go as fast as I can and hope that the referee jumps in and stops this, because I don't have enough time to try to dig in and try to knock him out. Not to mention I was never the strongest guy anyway, punching power-wise. But I had him hurt bad enough to where I could have maybe loaded up a couple of shots, but I didn't feel like I had enough time to do that. So I started trying to throw my hands as fast as possible. And Sam just kind of took them and didn't hold, and just kind of took them. And at the end of the round, was fortunate enough that the bell rang. Then 2 rounds later, he got me out of there. But I remember thinking, he probably learned to hold in that situation. But no, a couple of fights later, he wins the European title. And then a couple of fights later, this African guy, I forget his name now, but gets him in the same situation where he hurts him. I think it was only round 2 or 3. And Sam doesn't hold. But now you're in the middle of the round. So this guy is punching you and punching you and punching you and punching you. And Sam doesn't go down. Sam's got great legs. He doesn't go down, but the referee has to stop it because you're in the middle of a round. You're not responding, and you keep getting hit with a bunch of unanswered punches. So that kind of brought him back down to earth and made people stop talking about him. And since then, he's kind of been up and down. But this Molina win, especially coming off the Ted Cheeseman loss, this Molina win is a really important win for Sam, because now it kind of puts him back in the conversation. Yeah. You get the WBC Silver title, which is a relatively prestigious belt. Yeah. It puts you in a good position for more important fights. And now Sam once again has the opportunity. He's with a new promotion. I think he's with Hennessy Sports now. He's got the opportunity now to build off of this. And this is where we've seen him before. We've seen him before when he beat me and when he won the European title the fight after, and he started to tilt out afterwards. Now he's back here again with some nice wins, with a nice win here. And where does he go? How is he going to react in his next fight? And that's the thing about Sam Eggington. He's got to now make sure he's old enough now. He's not an old man by any means, but he's old enough now, and he's got enough maturity and veteran experience now to understand that now, coming off of a nice big win, he's got to know how to piggyback that into something better and not be disappointing in his next performance. And I think he understands that. And like I said, he has the experience to know that. And I look forward to seeing more of him.
Hopefully it's onwards and upwards for Sam Eggington. Also, UB2 champ Shakan Pitters is back to winning ways after losing his British title to Craig Richards. So well done to him. Right, let's get into the predictions. And this week we have the big one. It's not as easy to predict as people think it is either. Devin Haney against Linares. What are you expecting from that fight? The majority of people are going to expect almost the passing of the torch, if you like, from Linares over to Devin Haney. But he looks good, Linares. He always does when he's hitting pads and when he's training. He always looks fired up. What are you expecting? An upset? Do you think there can be one?
No, I think Linares has passed his best. Jorge Linares, has had some great wins. He's always been a bit of an inconsistent guy himself, because his chin was always a bit questionable, and he would randomly get himself knocked out by random opponents here and there. So, especially as he gets older, I feel like that puts him more at risk for that to happen. I think he'll show some of his veteran savvy in the fight. I think it's a good fight for Haney at this point in his career, on his rise up the ranks, and I expect Haney to. I wouldn't say it's a passing of the torch, because we kind of already know that Linares is already on the come down, but it is a big name for Haney to have on his resume. So it's a nice scalp to pick up, and if Haney can do it in an impressive fashion, that will be even more not only important, but also more impressive in the eyes of the fans, the critics, and the media. So I expect Haney to come out of this. My curiosity is, how good does he look in doing it? Because now this is a recognizable opponent. Even if it's a fading opponent, it's still a recognizable opponent with a very good history on his own resume, which Linares has been a multiple-time world champion in multiple weight classes. Smart opposition pick, though, because Linares is on the way down.
Yep.
Like I said, I had said before, Pablo Cano, one of my former opponents, had just stopped Linares not that long ago in one round, But Pablo Cano, and I'll tell you this myself, is a weird guy because he shows up randomly motivated and he has heavy hands. He has very heavy hands. Pablo Cano is one of the heaviest punchers I fought in my career. But you're going to put him in a fight one night where he's not even showing up and he barely trained and he couldn't barely make weight. And then you put him in another fight when he's fully motivated and he's really got his guns blazing and he's a tough out for anybody.
Yeah.
So I would think Haney beating Cano would be more impressive at this point, especially if Cano knocked out Haney. But I understand it's perception more than reality. And the perception, especially the most casual fans, is Jorge Linares' name. So you're going to get more credit out of beating Jorge Linares than you are out of beating Pablo Cano. And I think that Haney will do that. But my curiosity is I want to see how good he looks in doing that, how well he executes his game plan. And it's, again, something we all look forward to seeing because he is in the conversation for the big fights at lightweight and super lightweight.
It's considered a step up, but is this a bigger step up for him than, say, the Gamboa fight?
Same kind of opposition. I think it's slightly better than Gamboa. I think Gamboa was more shot than Linares is. But not by much, I think they're both shot fighters. But again, this is not a criticism because this is the way you usually come up the ladder. You come up the ladder because I like I said, I still can't consider Haney's WBC title a major world title. So for me, it's par for the course for the come up and beating these faded guys. Now, if you're a world champion doing that, it's a bit you can attract a bit more criticism, deservedly so, because world champions are not supposed to be fighting guys this faded. But being that personally, I don't see Haney's world title as a legitimate world title yet. I don't have a problem with Haney fighting these guys. As a matter of fact, I think it's par for the course, and it's the right way to do it, and it's the right way to make the kid gain confidence, get better, and also become familiar in the eyes of fans because he's beating guys that were known to a lot of fans.
Well, Haney doesn't think that. Haney thinks he's a world champion, a full world champion, and he thinks Lopez shouldn't be calling himself undisputed.
This generation, they sell themselves. They believe their own hype a lot of times. Personally, I use my own example with Senchenko, for example. I was fighting for the major, the premier version of the WBA title, and I would not have gone to Ukraine if that fight was for the secondary version of the belt. I would not have gone there. I would not have cared enough to risk my entire career going to a foreign country, risk getting robbed for a secondary belt. Only reason I went to Ukraine is because I knew it was for the premier version, which today would be called the super title. At that time, the super title only showed itself in certain circumstances, but I would not have even bothered going to Ukraine and put myself in harm's way for a chance to be railroaded or robbed for a secondary belt because even if I won it, I would not have considered myself a champion. Now that's not just for me. I think that's in general. When you look at it from a logical standpoint, there has to be. We already have multiple sanctioning bodies that are major sanctioning bodies, but they have to have one major world title per sanctioning body. You can't have two major world titles per sanctioning body. It borders on the ridiculous, if not full blown ridiculous. So if you don't have the premier version of your sanctioning body's world championship and you are considering yourself a world champion, then myself personally, I don't think you hold yourself to a high enough standard. And maybe you have an insecurity about whether you can actually win a major world title because you, I, and all of them know that winning the premier version of that world championship will be a more difficult fight. And this proves it. Haney beating Gamboa and Haney beating Linares is a much tougher fight than Haney fighting Teofimo Lopez, who actually has the main title. So you, I, and everybody else know that winning the premier version of the world championship with that sanctioning body will always be a tougher fight, and that's why they created a secondary belt. So if you can consider yourself a major world champion having the secondary version of any world championship of any sanctioning body, then for me, you're not holding yourself to a high enough standard, and for me, it's a bit of an insecurity.
So how do you rank the let's call it the modern four kings of that division? So I'm guessing we've got Tank, Undisputed, number one. Oh, not Tank, sorry, Lopez, number one. Where do you go from there? Where are you putting Garcia? Where are you putting Tank? And where are you putting Haney?
I was starting to rate Garcia pretty high after the Luke Campbell win because I felt the Luke Campbell win was a better win than Gervonta or Devin Haney had on their respective ledgers. I also feel like Campbell was a less shot fighter than is Linares or Gamboa, who both Gervonta and Devin have beaten. But with Ryan kind of leaving the scene right now, it's hard to and not being consistent at such a young age, it's hard to kind of put him in that position right now. Maybe in the future he'll go back to to motivating my mind to consider him more. But right now, I can't consider Ryan while guys like Gervonta and Devin are actually pushing their careers. I would have probably looked at Ryan as number 2 before, but now I'll probably go with Gervonta number 2 and Haney number 3 and Ryan number 4 out of those guys. But with an eye on their next fight, because I don't think Linares is a threat to Haney to beat him, but I want to see how Haney beats Linares. I want to see how he looks. I do think Mario Barrios is a bit of a threat to Gervonta Davies, though. I think Mario Barrios is not known enough. I think it's I don't even know how much of a calculated risk it is, because Mario Barrios, I've seen him come up the ladder. He's a pretty good fighter. Granted, there's a lot of pressure on him because this is his biggest fight of his career, but Mario Barrios can fight. And I don't think he's known enough to where if Gervonta loses to this guy, people will understand that he lost to a good fighter. I think Mario Barrios is a good fighter. So for me, Gervonta is in a tougher fight. And there's a threat that he can lose. I'm not saying he will lose, but I'm saying the threat is there that he can lose. I don't think Haney can lose to Linares. So the thing I'm looking about for Gervonta is, yes, I want to see how he wins the fight if he wins it, but also just him winning over Mario Barrios is impressive. Haney just winning over a shot Linares is not impressive. I want to see Haney in a good performance and see how he looks in the fight, and then I'll get a better judgment of them. But right now, I would say Teofimo Lopez, Gervonta Davies, Devin Haney, and Ryan Garcia. With Garcia kind of waiting in the wings, I felt like he was ready to open up, but then he's kind of sat back, and I've got to drop him in the ranking for that reason.
Here's a curveball. Lomachenko, where is he? Where is he?
Lomachenko is interesting because he's also fighting soon. I think Lomachenko is fighting the same night as Gervonta, actually, right? I think Gervonta Davies and Mario Barrios are fighting the same night as Lomachenko and Nakatani. Credit to Lomachenko, he took on Nakatani because Nakatani was a stubborn opponent for Teofimo Lopez, so he wants to kind of get the comparison there. He's a very, very motivated guy. I just feel like at the same time he's sort of obsessed with proving people wrong, because I don't think this is his weight class. Just him staying at lightweight puts him at a lot of risk. Yeah. He's just not a lightweight. And it goes to show you his talent, and staying at lightweight and continuing to win at lightweight is never going to be appreciated anyway. People just don't appreciate this, So why not just go back down to your own weight class and go dominate at your own weight class? Because at lightweight, you're putting yourself in harm's way from a physical and mental standpoint, and you're putting yourself in criticism's way if you don't perform at lightweight, which is a weight class you don't even belong in. You're clearly smaller than all these guys. But his obsession with his competitiveness is so strong that it puts him here. Listen, he's so good that he's going to beat Nakatani. Nakatani's no slouch. But then again, you put yourself in a position, you're not getting younger, and you're also smaller than all these guys. These guys are all lightweight / super lightweights, with the exception of Gervonta, who I think just goes super lightweight for the convenience. But I think Haney and Teofimo legitimately won't be able to make the lightweight limit much longer. So they're much bigger than Lomachenko, So the more you hang around there, the more and the older you're getting, because you're older than the whole bunch. The other guys are all young guys budding into stars, while Lomachenko is kind of on the other end of his prime. You're putting yourself more at risk. He's always in the conversation. He's always a terrific fighter, and he may beat them, but it's not going to be appreciated. Yeah. And you hanging around there is not going to be appreciated, and you're putting yourself in position to be criticized so much more than being praised if you actually do anything there. The squeeze, the juice is not worth the squeeze, essentially. Like if you get beat there, the criticism is this much. If you win there, the praise is only this much. So it's just, it doesn't add up to me. But Lomachenko is a super competitor, and he deserves credit for thinking this way. I just would be just throw my hands out at people and say, forget this, man. I'm going down to 130 pounds. But credit to him for, staying there.
Suppose things will get a lot clearer in the next few weeks. We start working out who beats who and in what fashion, and we'll take it from there. Also, this weekend is Chantelle Cameron fighting Melissa Hernandez. Now, I know you know her, and she's not to be kind of looked past, is she?
No, Melissa is probably getting up there in age. I used to train in Gleason's gym with her in the early 2000s. She was very, very slick. I mean, girls say they box guys, but a lot of them are not going with guys who are actually hitting them. Like, Melissa Hernandez could get in there with guys, and guys would have to hit her because she was that good. But she would have nobody taking care of her, so she ended up having an upside down record at times or whatnot. But she was very, very good. I think she won world championships regardless of her record. She would have to go into positions where she'd get robbed, where she'd go into these people's hometowns and whatnot. Very, very good fighter. And I would assume that even at this point in her career, she's probably still not someone to be taken lightly, even though I assume at her age she's being brought in as the opponent for Cameron.
Right. Well, that is it for us this week. Let us know what your predictions are. Who do you think is going to win out of Devin Haney and Linares? Same with Cameron and Hernandez. As always, remember, like, comment, subscribe. Chelsea are in the top 4. All is well in the world. And we will see you next week. Yes, people, I am Savage Dan.
I'm Paulie Malignaggi.
You are watching Mouthpiece, the official boxing podcast.
We are two of the most knowledgeable, two of the most charismatic, biggest personality guys in boxing, and we are two of the coolest cats talking about the sport today.